Silas Marner by George Eliot, pen name of Marian Evans, was published in 1861 and is a rich story about redemption, transformation, and the power of community. Here are some interesting facts and historical contexts that illuminate the novel. 1. Industrial Revolution background. Silas Marner is set in the early 19th century, a period of significant social and economic change in England due to the Industrial Revolution. This era saw a shift from agrarian communities to industrialized towns and cities, leading to the breakdown of traditional, close-knit village life. The village of Raveloe, where Silas lives, represents an older, more communal England that contrasts with the mechanized and personal society emerging in urban areas like Lantern Yard. Eliot reflects on these changes and their impact on community bonds and individual identity. 2. Influence of Eliot's personal life and faith. George Eliot was raised in a devoutly religious family, and her experiences with religion influenced Silas Marner. Eliot ultimately became critical of organized religion and sought spiritual and ethical values outside traditional religious institutions. The character of Silas Marner undergoes a journey that mirrors Eliot's own struggles with faith. Silas initially suffers from betrayal by his religious community, leading him to reject faith and human connection. His eventual redemption comes not to religion but to love and compassion. 3. Eliot's critique of social class and wealth. Silas Marner critiques Victorian society's materialism and rigid class structures. Characters like Godfrey and Dunstan Cass represent the entitled upper class, while Silas, a weaver, embodies the working class. The novel contrasts the Cass family's hollow pursuit of wealth with Silas's transformative experience with Eppie. Eliot suggests that true happiness and worth are found in relationships rather than social status or wealth. 4. Eliot's emphasis on realism. George Eliot was a pioneer of literary realism, striving to depict ordinary people and their psychological depth rather than heroic or idealized characters. In Silas Marner, she provides nuanced depictions of village life, exploring the inner lives of her characters and the moral complexities of their decisions. Eliot's commitment to realism also shows in her portrayal of Raveloe, based on actual Warwickshire villages she knew from childhood, lending the story authenticity and depth. 5. Exploration of isolation and community. The theme of isolation versus community is central to the novel. Silas begins as a reclusive, alienated figure due to betrayal and trauma but ultimately finds redemption through his relationships with the people of Raveloe, especially through raising Eppie. Eliot uses Silas's journey to highlight the importance of social bonds and mutual care, a contrast to the increasingly isolated lives brought about by industrialization. This theme was a subtle critique of the growing disconnection in Victorian society. 6. Controversial themes for the Victorian audience. Eliot's work tackled themes of morality, faith, and personal growth outside of conventional religious boundaries, which was daring for a Victorian audience that often viewed moral virtue as tied to religious practice. By focusing on Silas's secular redemption, Eliot challenged the era's dominant belief that moral salvation required religious faith. Silas achieves a deep sense of purpose and belonging through human connection, rather than through any return to formal religious belief. 7. Symbolism of gold and love. Gold plays a symbolic role in Silas Marner. Initially, Silas's hoard of gold coins symbolizes his isolation and greed, filling the void left by his betrayal in Lantern Yard. However, after losing the gold, Silas finds a different kind of riches in raising Eppie. Eliot uses this transformation to emphasize the power of love to bring genuine happiness, contrasting it with the hollow security that wealth provides. 8. Role of women in Victorian society. The novel subtly critiques the limited roles and expectations for women in Victorian society. Characters like Nancy Lamb Reader and Eppie face societal expectations about marriage and duty. Eppie's decision to remain with Silas instead of moving to the Cass household reflects Eliot's support for personal choice and individual agency over social pressures. 9. Reflection of Eliot's humanist philosophy. Eliot was a strong advocate for humanism, believing in the importance of empathy, compassion, and ethical behavior outside religious doctrine. Through Silas Marner, She argues that redemption and personal growth come through human love and connections, not solely through religious repentance. 10. Criticism and enduring popularity. Initially, Silas Marner was received with mixed reviews. Some critics felt the story was simple and sentimental compared to Eliot's more complex works like Middlemarch or Adam Bede. However, Silas Marner has endured as a favorite due to its heartwarming story and universal themes. Today, it's celebrated for its intricate depiction of rural life, moral development, and the transformative power of love, qualities that resonate with readers across generations. 11. Eliot's use of pseudonyms and gender expectations. George Eliot was the pen name of Marian Evans, who adopted a male pseudonym to ensure her works were taken seriously in a male-dominated literary world. During the Victorian era, female authors were often expected to write light-hearted romances or domestic novels, but Eliot's works challenged these norms by tackling profound social and philosophical issues. Silas Marner is a fine example of her literary prowess, containing psychological depth, social critique, and moral inquiry that went beyond typical women's literature of the time, helping Eliot pave the way for future female writers. 12. Influence of the English class system. The English class system plays a significant role in Silas Marner, as seen in the stark contrasts between characters like Godfrey Cass, an heir to wealth and privilege, and Silas Marner, a poor weaver. In Victorian England, social status was a major determinant of one's opportunities and life path, with limited mobility between classes. By showing the Cass family's moral shortcomings and Silas's eventual happiness in his modest life, Eliot critiques the superficiality of class distinctions and promotes the idea that true worth lies in character and human connection rather than social standing. 13. Romantic and realist influences. Silas Marner incorporates elements of both Romanticism and Realism, two popular literary movements of the 19th century. The novel's pastoral setting and focus on nature, simplicity, and personal redemption reflect romantic ideals, while its detailed, realistic depiction of rural life aligns with Eliot's commitment to realism. This blending of styles gives the novel both emotional warmth and grounded social critique, allowing Eliot to create a story that's both idealistic and pragmatically insightful. 14. Victorian attitudes toward adoption and orphanhood. The theme of adoption in Silas Marner, as Silas adopts and raises Zippy, reflects Victorian England's complex attitudes toward orphans and adopted children. In the 19th century, orphans were often looked upon with pity and seen as a social responsibility, but adopting an orphan was still unusual and somewhat stigmatized. Eliot's positive portrayal of Silas's love for Ippy and the fulfillment it brings challenges societal norms, suggesting that family bonds can be formed through love and devotion rather than blood alone. 15. The rise of the rural novel in Victorian literature. Silas Marner is an example of the Victorian-era rural novel, a genre that gained popularity as England became increasingly urbanized. As cities grew, there was a nostalgic yearning for the simplicity and perceived purity of country life, which authors like Eliot explored in their works. Eliot's portrayal of Raveloe captures the warmth and cohesiveness of village life but also examines its limitations, superstitions, and narrow-mindedness, presenting a balanced view of rural society. 16. Eliot's attention to moral psychology. Eliot was one of the earliest writers to delve deeply into the moral psychology of her characters. In Silas Marner, she explores themes of guilt, redemption, isolation, and the human need for connection. This psychological realism was ahead of its time and influenced future authors, who began to view characters as complex beings shaped by their moral struggles and inner conflicts. 17. Victorian interest in superstition and mysticism. The villagers of Raveloe exhibit a range of superstitions and mystical beliefs, often viewing Silas with suspicion due to his unusual habits and outsider status. In Victorian England, while science and rationalism were rising, many people, especially in rural areas, still held superstitious beliefs and were wary of anything that deviated from the norm. Eliot's inclusion of these superstitions in Silas Marner provides authenticity to the setting and highlights the ways in which fear of the unknown can lead to exclusion and mistrust, a recurring issue in human societies. 18. Social critique of the poor laws and welfare system. Victorian England's welfare system, known as the Poor Laws, often stigmatized and marginalized the poor, offering little in terms of effective support. Silas Marner indirectly critiques these societal failings by showing how Silas, a marginalized figure, receives no real support until he becomes integrated into the community through his connection with Ippy. Eliot's portrayal of community aid, with the villagers supporting each other in times of hardship, suggests a more compassionate and communal approach to poverty than the punitive systems of the time. 19. Reflection of Eliot's interest in philosophical humanism. Eliot was influenced by humanist philosophy, which emphasizes ethics and morality outside of religious institutions. This theme appears strongly in Silas Marner, where the moral growth of characters like Silas, Godfrey, and even Nancy is guided by personal responsibility, empathy, and a sense of duty to others rather than religious dogma. Eliot's novel suggests that true human goodness arises from compassion and responsibility rather than strict adherence to religious or social codes. 20. The theme of redemption and forgiveness. Redemption is a central theme in Silas Marner, with Silas's life transformed from bitterness and isolation to love and community through his relationship with Ippy. This theme reflects Eliot's belief in the capacity for human change and the importance of forgiveness, both of self and others. Through Silas's journey, Eliot suggests that healing from past traumas requires trust, acceptance, and the courage to open oneself to new relationships, providing a timeless message about resilience and second chances. 21. Influence of Eliot's philosophical and literary contemporaries. Eliot was well read and influenced by philosophers and writers such as Ludwig Feuerbach, who emphasized human-centered ethics, and Charles Darwin, whose theories of evolution were beginning to shape Victorian thought. These intellectual influences encouraged Eliot to focus on themes of moral growth, human resilience, and the idea of survival through personal change. In Silas Marner, we see an emphasis on naturalistic development, showing how personal redemption and societal change are gradual, grounded in everyday experiences, much like Darwin's concept of adaptation. 22. Lasting legacy and adaptations. Silas Marner has been adapted into plays, films, television series, and even operas, illustrating its enduring appeal. These adaptations often focus on the novel's universal themes of love, community, and redemption, showing that Eliot's insights into human nature continue to resonate with modern audiences. The novel is also frequently studied in schools and universities, not only for its narrative qualities but for Eliot's forward-thinking social and psychological insights, which make it a valuable work for discussions on morality, resilience, and the social fabric. Thanks for listening and watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Like this video. It helps more people find these classic stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think.